Brothers, leaving the battlefield doesn't mean the war is over. There are days when silence is more terrifying than gunfire, because the ghosts of the past know how to creep in, then stand right behind you. In Savannah, in a small diner by the river, a deputy deliberately spills coffee on the floor, right in front of Ranger. A German Shepherd service dog, Jack Mercer doesn't get angry. No act, just looks up, chillingly calm. And then Sheriff Briggs walks in, everything changes. But the monster doesn't stop there. Fog leads to a warehouse. A child is hidden in the shadows. Calvin Rourke is behind, and Wade Harlan thinks power is a shield. If cornered, will you run or fight? Hold the line. Sit down here. Listen further. To learn the survival lessons of a protector. Knell for more unforgettable stories. Break time and Mixer on threes.
Cold river air slid through Savannah's streets, carrying fog and the faint bite of winter. The sky stayed pale and blank, as if it refused to take sides. Jack Mercer chose the booth with its back to the wall, not because he wanted to be dramatic, but because his body never stopped mapping exits. The old knee in his left leg stiffened when he sat, a reminder that some battles stayed under the skin long after the noise was gone. He wore the same outfit he always wore when he needed to disappear in plain sight. A navy winter coat that reached mid-thigh, a red and black plaid flannel beneath it, faded jeans, and brown, low-cut leather boots worn soft at the edges. The kind of clothes people stopped noticing after a second glance. Beside him sat Ranger, a 5-year-old German Shepherd with black and tan markings, upright ears, and amber-brown eyes that missed nothing. The dog did not fidget, did not beg, did not look around like a pet hoping for attention.
Ranger watched the room the way Jack did. Quiet, constant, measuring. A black service vest lay fitted close to Ranger's back, the white letters blunt and uninviting. Service dog. Do not pet. Jack kept one hand near his coffee and the other resting low, close enough that Ranger could feel it without being touched. That mattered. Touching was for comfort. Presence was for control. The diner smelled like bacon grease, syrup, and old wood warmed by a tired heater. The ceiling fans turned slowly, like they were half asleep. Forks clinked. Someone laughed at a joke that wasn't funny enough to repeat. Normal life, playing its usual music. Jack tried to let it stay normal. He had not come to Savannah for a hero moment. He had come for a reason that sat heavier than his coat. A letter. A name. A thread tied to someone who had not been found. He told himself, breakfast first, thinking second, then work. The bell over the door jingled. The air changed before Jack even looked up.
Deputy Wade Harlan walked in like the diner owed him space. Mid-30s, average height, thick neck, shoulders squared like he was always bracing for a fight. His hair was cut short and neat, and his eyes carried a pale, restless glare that never fully landed on a person, only on what he could take from them. He wore a uniform that fit too tight at the arms, and a smile that did not reach his face. Wade's confidence came from a simple place. He believed nothing bad could happen to him here. 2 other uniformed men followed him, laughing softly, loud enough to be heard. That laugh was a signal, a small warning to everyone inside. Behave or become entertainment. Jack did not move. He did not lower his gaze. He did not raise it either. He kept his eyes at the level of a man who expected trouble but refused to invite it. Ranger's ears twitched once. Then stillness returned, perfect and controlled. Wade's attention drifted, then snapped toward the booth like a magnet finding metal. His eyes flicked to Ranger's vest, then to Jack's flannel, then to Jack's face. Bullies could smell restraint.
They mistook it for fear. Wade approached with a paper cup of coffee, walking slow, dragging the moment out. The diner quieted in small pieces. A chair stopped squeaking. A spoon paused in midair. A conversation died halfway through a sentence. Wade reached Jack's table and held the cup over the floor near Ranger's paws. He tilted it, slowly, on purpose. Coffee struck the tile with an ugly splash, spreading dark and steaming. The smell rose sharp and bitter, like a warning. Ranger did not move, not an inch. Jack watched the liquid spread, then lifted his eyes to Wade's face. His expression stayed calm, but his focus tightened, the way it did when something crossed a line. Wade's smile widened. "Clean it up," he said, loud enough for the whole diner. "And make it quick." A couple of customers looked down at their menus like they had suddenly become fascinating. A man near the window stared hard at his plate. People were not cruel. Most of them were tired. Most of them had jobs they could lose and families they couldn't afford to endanger. Fear did not need a speech. It only needed a badge and a man willing to use it. Behind the counter, a waitress froze with a coffee pot in her hands. Her name tag read MIA. Mia Collins looked about 28. Pale from long shifts and short sleep, hair pulled back with a few loose strands falling across her forehead. Her eyes were a cool blue-gray, quick and observant, the eyes of someone who had learned to read moods for survival. She did not look impressed by Wade. She looked wary of him, like a person who had seen this movie before and hated the ending. Mia's hands trembled slightly, but she didn't step away. She watched Jack instead. Jack understood her in a quiet way. The tremble was not weakness. It was anger with nowhere safe to go. He took a slow breath and felt his knee ache under the table, a dull pulse. Pain did not make him angry. It made him careful. He spoke softly, just enough to cut through the silence. "You done?" Jack asked. No threat in it. No raised voice. No drama. That calm landed worse than shouting. Wade's eyebrows lifted as if Jack had broken a rule. "Excuse me?" Jack didn't look away. His eyes were dark brown, normally warm, but now sharp with something older than this diner. "You heard me." Wade leaned closer, letting his badge hover like a weapon. "You don't talk to me like that." Jack glanced down at the spill, then back up, like he was cataloging evidence. His voice stayed even. "I came in here to eat." Wade laughed, but it sounded thin, like metal tapped too hard. One of the other deputies snorted, too loud, trying to keep the power alive. Wade's gaze dropped to Ranger. He crouched slightly, pretending interest. "Nice dog," he said, and his tone turned poisonous in a smooth, casual way. "Shame if she got trained to bite the wrong person." Ranger's eyes tracked him. No growl, no baring teeth. Just alertness so clean it felt like a knife laid on a table. Jack's stomach tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. He had met men like Wade in different uniforms, in different countries, in places where power got drunk and started hurting anything smaller than it. It always began the same way. A small cruelty, performed slowly for an audience. Jack pushed his hands flat on the table and stood. Not fast, not aggressive, just rising to full height, shoulders broad under the navy coat, the red and black flannel visible like a warning flag no one had earned. The room felt smaller. Mia swallowed hard. She didn't know who Jack was, but she felt the shift. A man who did not flinch
was a man who had already endured worse than humiliation.
Jack looked at Wade and spoke quietly, the way you might speak to someone standing too close to a cliff. "Step back," he said. Wade's smile faltered for the first time. It was only a twitch, but it was real. Outside, somewhere beyond the diner walls, a siren wailed faintly, then faded, like the city itself turning its head away. And the coffee on the floor kept spreading, dark and steaming, as if the diner had begun to bleed. A thin fog clung to Savannah's riverfront, and the diner windows sweated with cold. Outside, the street looked washed clean, like the city was pretending it had nothing to hide. Jack Mercer stayed standing, steady in his navy mid-thigh winter coat, red and black plaid flannel, faded jeans, and brown low-cut leather boots. The spilled coffee still steamed on the tile near Ranger's paws, dark as an insult that refused to dry. Ranger, a black and tan German shepherd with upright ears and amber-brown eyes, didn't move. The white block letters on the service vest read, "Service dog, do not pet," blunt as a boundary line. Jack didn't touch the dog. He didn't have to. Ranger could feel his presence like a hand on the shoulder without the weight. Deputy Wade Harlan held his ground, but his smile had begun to crack. There was a certain kind of power that depended on noise, on laughter, on the room agreeing to be afraid. Jack had taken the noise away without lifting a finger. Wade tried to get it back. "You think you're some kind of tough guy?" he said, louder now, turning his head so the whole diner could hear. "You're gonna clean that up, now." Jack's eyes stayed on Wade's face, not the badge, not the gun, not the ego attached to both. His gaze was calm, and that calm had edges. "I'm not cleaning up something you did on purpose," Jack said. His voice stayed level, almost quiet. "Step back." Wade's nostrils flared. He took half a step closer anyway, like he couldn't help himself. Or what? The question hung there, begging for violence, begging for a shove, begging for something that would turn Jack into a story Wade could tell at the station. Jack didn't give it to him. Instead, Jack looked around the diner, meeting the eyes that dared to look up. He saw the fear and the shame in those faces. He knew it wasn't personal. People didn't freeze because they were weak. They froze because they had learned what happened to anyone who didn't. At the counter, Mia Collins gripped the coffee pot with both hands. Her blue-gray eyes were sharp, but her mouth was tight, like she was biting down words that could cost her job. She was the kind of woman who served smiles for tips, but saves her real courage for moments that mattered. Jack could feel her wanting to do something. He could also feel her fear. He shifted his stance slightly, protecting the booth behind him without making a show of it. His left knee complained, a dull burn that reminded him to choose angles that didn't force speed. He wasn't young enough to pretend injuries were nothing. He was old enough to know pain could be useful. Pain made you careful. Careful kept people alive. Wade's eyes dropped to Ranger again, hungry for a reaction. "Dog like that," he said, and his voice turned slick with threat. "Gets people hurt." Ranger's ears twitched once, then stillness returned. The dog's gaze followed Wade the way a spotlight follows movement. No growl. No lunge. Just readiness. Wade hated that most of all. He wanted the dog to be dangerous so he could justify anything he did next. Jack felt something cold and familiar settle in his chest. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. He'd seen men like Wade in different uniforms, in places where the law was just another costume. The cruelty was always small at first. A test. a performance, a dare to see who would stop them. The diner doorbell jingled again. This time, the sound didn't feel like a warning. It felt like a verdict. Sheriff Harold Briggs stepped inside, tall enough to fill the doorway without trying. He looked about 58, hair gray and cut short, skin weathered by sun and years. A thin mustache sat above a mouth that didn't waste smiles. His eyes were a pale blue that looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He carried authority the way some men carried weight. Quiet, heavy, undeniable. The room shifted instantly. Wade's shoulders tightened, like a kid caught stealing. Briggs' gaze moved across the diner in a practiced sweep. Spilled coffee. Deputies clustered too close. Mia frozen behind the counter. Jack standing with his back straight, dressed like a man who didn't care who noticed him. And then Briggs' eyes landed on Ranger. The service vest. The discipline. The stillness that didn't come from fear. Briggs took a slow step closer. "What's going on here?" he asked. Wade answered fast. Too fast. "Nothing, Sheriff. Just a guy with an attitude. He's refusing to—" Briggs lifted one hand, stopping the sentence in midair. He looked at Jack, not like a cop sizing up a suspect, but like a man reading a room for the truth. Jack turned slightly, enough for the sheriff to see the way he carried himself. The scars weren't obvious. The story was. Some people only understood violence. Briggs understood restraint. "No trouble," Jack said. "Just having breakfast." Briggs's eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but with a sudden focus. He didn't ask Jack to sit. He didn't ask him to relax. He asked the one question that mattered. "Sir," Briggs said carefully, "may I see your ID?" Jack reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, and handed it over without ceremony. No swagger, no challenge, just fact. Briggs looked down. Color drained from his face in a way so subtle most people would miss it. But Mia saw it. Wade saw it. Jack saw it. Briggs read again, as if he needed to make sure his eyes weren't lying. His jaw tightened. Then he handed the card back with both hands, like the paper had suddenly become heavier than it should be. "My apologies," Briggs said. His voice was firm, controlled, and it didn't leave room for debate. Then he turned to Wade and the other deputies. His tone dropped into something colder than anger. "All of you outside. Now." Wade blinked like he hadn't heard right. "Sheriff." "Outside," Briggs repeated, sharper. "Before you make this worse." Chairs scraped. Boots shifted. The deputies moved, not because they wanted to, but because the room had changed sides. Authority had arrived, and it wasn't wearing Wade's grin. Wade's eyes flicked once toward Ranger, then away. For the first time, he looked unsure of his own power. When the door shut behind them, the diner exhaled like a person coming up for air. Jack sat down slowly. His knee protested, and he let the discomfort pass without a flinch. Ranger relaxed a fraction and pressed a shoulder lightly against Jack's leg, a quiet check-in. Jack rested his palm briefly against Ranger's neck, grounding himself more than the dog. Mia approached with a fresh cup of coffee. Her hands steadied now that the pressure had moved outside. "On the house," she said softly. Jack nodded once. "Thank you." Briggs lingered, eyes still serious. "I'm sorry," he said again, lower this time, like he meant it. Jack didn't offer forgiveness. He didn't demand it either. He just looked at the coffee stain on the floor
and the faces of the people who had watched. "Keep your men in check," Jack said. Briggs's mouth tightened. "I will." Later, when Jack stepped back into the cold Savannah air, the fog had thinned, but the feeling in his gut stayed sharp. He didn't need to look over his shoulder to know a car was there, idling too long. Ranger walked at his side, silent. Half a block down, Ranger's ears lifted. A small signal, a warning without noise. Jack didn't run. He didn't turn to confront. He changed direction, guiding them toward a brighter street where public cameras watched the sidewalks like unblinking eyes. If someone wanted to follow him, they were going to do it in the light. And that was when the headlights behind him slowly rolled forward. Night settled over Savannah with damp cold, and river fog drifted between street lamps. The wind tasted like salt and old wood, as if the past was breathing through the docks. Jack Mercer kept to the brighter streets, where public cameras watched the sidewalks and the light made shadows honest. He moved with the same steady caution he used in every unfamiliar place. Navy winter coat brushing his thighs, red and black plaid flannel visible when the wind tugged at the front. His faded jeans and brown, low-cut leather boots looked ordinary. That was the point. Ranger walked close at heel. The German shepherd's black and tan coat caught the streetlight in brief flashes. Upright ears, amber-brown eyes, quiet focus. The service vest sat firm on Ranger's back, the white letters clear even in the dark. Service dog, do not pet. Jack did not look behind him. He didn't need to. He felt the slow roll of headlights at his back the way some people felt a stare. Not fear exactly, more like an old switch flipping on inside him. A reminder that when someone followed you, it was never about curiosity. It was about control. He turned down a block lined with closed antique shops and brick walls stained by years of rain. The car stayed with him, distant enough to pretend innocence, close enough to promise trouble. Jack counted the seconds between its turns, counted the pauses at stop signs, learned the rhythm. Ranger gave a small signal, barely more than a change in breathing, a confirmation. You are not imagining this. Jack's left knee ached as he walked, a dull pulse that made his steps precise. Pain had taught him to plan, not rush. Rushing was how people got hurt. He crossed under a brighter camera mounted on a pole and paused just long enough to let the lens catch his face and the dog at his side. Then he kept moving, letting the follower decide what mattered more, intimidation or secrecy. Half a mile later, the car finally peeled away. Jack didn't relax. Not yet. He followed the address from the letter that had brought him here, threading through streets that grew quieter and older. The riverfront wasn't romantic at night. It was practical. Dark water, stacked crates, empty walkways. The kind of place where a person could disappear if nobody wanted to ask questions. The warehouse sat near the docks, half hidden behind a line of scrubby trees and rusted fencing. A forgotten building trying to look harmless. The windows were either boarded or black. A single security light flickered above a side door, weak and unreliable. Jack stopped at the edge of the lot and studied the ground. Tracks. Not fresh enough to shine, but fresh enough to matter. Tire marks, heavy and repeated. Footprints in damp sand near the back. Too many for a building that was supposed to be empty. Ranger's head lifted slightly. The dog's gaze locked on the warehouse like it had weight. Jack didn't tell himself stories. He didn't jump to conclusions. He simply listened to what his instincts had learned to say when something was wrong. Something was wrong. He eased around the fence line, keeping the building between himself and the street. His coat moved softly with each step. The flannel kept warmth close. The service dog stayed silent, steady, professional. Jack's mind went back to the diner, to the way Wade Harlan had smiled when the coffee spilled. That wasn't just cruelty. That was practice. A man who practiced cruelty did it everywhere, not only when it was convenient. A light crunch sounded behind him. Jack turned, controlled and fast without looking fast. Mia Collins stood near the fence, hugging her arms tight against the cold. She wore a dark jacket over her diner uniform, hair pulled back but still messy from a long day. Her blue-gray eyes flashed with a mix of fear and stubbornness. "You shouldn't be here," Jack said quietly. "I know," Mia replied. Her voice was low but steady. "I tried to go home. I couldn't." "Not after today." Jack watched her face. Mia wasn't chasing excitement. She looked like someone who had lived with regret and didn't want to add another layer. "What do you know about this place?" Jack asked. Mia swallowed. "People say it's storage. People say a lot. But I've seen cars come and go late. I've heard things. And whenever anyone asks, someone from the department shows up to check in." She hesitated, then forced the words out. "My sister disappeared 2 years ago. The report went nowhere." Jack felt the weight of that sentence settle into the night. He didn't offer comfort he couldn't guarantee. He didn't say he understood, because understanding wasn't the same as carrying it. He simply nodded once, acknowledging what it cost her to say it. "You stay back," Jack told her. "If something happens, you call the number I gave you." Mia's eyes narrowed. "You're not bringing me in." "I'm not," Jack said. "This is not a movie." Mia let out a short, bitter breath, almost a laugh. "Good. I hate movies like this." Jack almost smiled, but his face didn't fully remember how. He pointed her toward the corner where the streetlight reached and where the nearest camera might catch movement. "There. Keep your phone ready. If you hear yelling, don't run toward it. Run toward light." Mia hesitated, then nodded. That was her courage, not recklessness. Choice. Jack moved closer to the warehouse, keeping his body between Mia and the building. Ranger stayed tight at heel, the vest visible, the posture perfect. They reached the back where the shadows were thicker. A narrow side door sat slightly crooked in its frame. The lock looked new, too clean for the rest of the place. Ranger paused, ears up. A subtle shift in stance. Jack's chest tightened. He leaned in, listening. At first, there was only the far sound of water and the faint buzz of the bad security light. Then he heard it. A small sound. Not a voice. Not words. A breath that didn't belong to an adult. Jack's hand moved to the door, testing it gently. He didn't force it. He didn't rush. He chose the quietest pressure point, the way he'd been trained to do when lives depended on silence. The door gave just enough to let him slip inside. The air smelled like dust and oil and something sour. He moved through the darkness with slow steps. Ranger followed without a sound, eyes working, body ready. Another breath. Closer now. Jack found a small storage room behind stacked boxes. The door was shut, but not fully latched. He opened it. A girl sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest. She looked about 10, maybe younger, in the way hunger could shrink a child. Her hair was dark and tangled. Her hoodie was too big.
Her hands were scraped raw in places, as if she had been trying to climb or claw her way out of something. Her eyes were wide and brown, rimmed with exhaustion, watching Jack like he was either rescue or another trap. Ranger sat instantly, calm and still, a quiet wall between the girl and the world. The girl stared at the dog first, then at the vest. Her breathing slowed by a fraction, like the words meant something safe even if she didn't fully trust it. Jack lowered himself to one knee, careful with his injured leg, careful with her fear. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're not in trouble." She didn't answer. Her mouth opened as if she wanted to speak, then closed again. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, fast and frightened. Jack felt it before he heard it. Footsteps outside. More than one. Ranger's gaze snapped toward the sound, no barking, no warning noise, only a sharp readiness that made Jack's skin prickle. A voice drifted in, lazy and cruel. "Well, look at that," Deputy Wade Harlan said. "The tough guy found his way into places he shouldn't be." Jack rose slowly, placing himself between the girl and the doorway. His navy coat and flannel shifted as he stood, boots planted, shoulders squared without threat. Wade stepped into view, his uniform neat, his eyes bright with that hungry confidence again. Behind him was a man Jack hadn't seen before. Calvin Rourke looked like money in human form. Early 50s, heavy watch at his wrist. Dark suit that didn't belong in dockside air. Hair combed back with gray at the edges. His face was smooth in a way that suggested careful living. His eyes were cold and measuring, like he was pricing everything he looked at. Calvin smiled, a small, polite smile that held no warmth. "This is awkward," Calvin said, voice soft, almost amused. "And I dislike awkward situations." Jack didn't move. He didn't speak. He simply kept his body in front of the girl, and Ranger sat at his side, silent, steady, and watching. Outside, the fog pressed closer to the warehouse walls. Inside, the trap finally showed its teeth. Rain had passed, leaving the dockboards slick and the air sharp. Fog drifted low off the Savannah River, turning every streetlight into a halo and every shadow into a question. Jack Mercer stood in the warehouse doorway like a locked gate. Navy winter coat to mid-thigh, red and black plaid flannel beneath, faded jeans, brown low-cut leather boots planted wide enough to hold the world back. His left knee pulsed with its familiar ache, but he didn't shift. Pain could talk all it wanted. He was listening to something else. Behind his legs, the girl, small, hollow-eyed, about 10, pulled her oversized hoodie tighter, as if fabric could keep danger out. She didn't cry. She didn't plead. Her fear was too old for that. It lived in her silence. Ranger sat at Jack's side, black and tan coat catching the weak light, ears upright, amber-brown eyes fixed on the men in front of them. The service vest on Ranger's back read, "Service dog, do not pet," a quiet command that felt louder than Wade's badge. Deputy Wade Harlan leaned into the doorway with that practiced grin, the one that said he'd hurt people before and called it order. Mid-30s, thick neck, pale eyes that never fully softened. His uniform looked like armor he didn't deserve. Next to him, Calvin Rourke wore wealth like it was proof of innocence. Early 50s, suit too clean for a dockside night, hair combed back, mouth shaped into a polite smile that never reached his cold, measuring eyes. Calvin's calm wasn't peace. It was confidence that other people always paid the price. Calvin's gaze slid past Jack and landed on the child. His smile tightened, almost annoyed. "This doesn't have to be messy," Calvin said softly. People get emotional. They do foolish things. You don't seem foolish. Wade chuckled, trying to make the moment feel like a joke again. He thinks he's some kind of hero. Jack didn't answer either of them. He looked down instead, speaking low to the girl without turning his head. Stay behind me, he said. When I move, you move with Mia. The girl's eyes flicked toward the warehouse shadows, then to Ranger's vest. Her breathing hitched. She nodded once, small and quick. Mia's shape was visible outside through a broken window line, standing where the streetlight and camera reach overlapped like a safe circle. Her phone was already in her hand, her face pale but set. She was terrified, and she was still there. That kind of courage was never loud. Calvin lifted one hand, palm up, as if offering a deal instead of a trap. I can make this disappear, he said. Money. A ticket out. You walk away and keep your pride. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. Not temptation. Disgust. He had seen this language before. The soft voice, the false mercy, the assumption that everyone had a price, and anyone who didn't was lying.
You don't get to buy children, Jack said. The words came out calm, almost gentle. That calm was what made Wade's face twitch. Wade stepped forward, anger rising like heat. You don't talk to him like that. Jack's eyes stayed on Wade now, and something sharpened behind them. Not rage. Calculation. Jack shifted his weight in a way that protected his bad knee and gave him a clean angle toward the open path. Wade, Jack said, and the use of the deputy's name made Wade blink. Step aside. Wade's grin returned, thin and furious. Or what? Jack didn't answer. He moved. Not fast enough to look like an attack, not slow enough to be stopped. A single step that changed the geometry of the room. Jack's shoulder brushed the doorframe, his coat sweeping back, and suddenly the warehouse no longer felt like a cage. It felt like a hallway with exits. Mia, Jack called, voice steady. Now. Mia didn't hesitate. She ran to the doorway, reached in without stepping fully inside, and the girl flinched at the movement. Then saw Mia's eyes and chose trust, the way a starving person chose food. The girl moved. Ranger moved with them, controlled and close, a quiet barrier that guided the child toward the light. Wade lunged to block the path. Jack intercepted him with a short, precise movement, more redirection than violence. A forearm, a pivot, a step that used Wade's own momentum to push him away from the child. Jack's knee barked with pain, sharp and hot, but he kept his face blank. He didn't fight to punish. He fought to open space. Calvin's smile vanished. Get them, Calvin snapped, his voice cracking for the first time. They spilled out into the fogged riverfront like a scene the city didn't want. Slick boards underfoot, damp air in the lungs, the river beside them, dark and patient. Mia pulled the girl toward the streetlight. Jack stayed a few paces behind, making himself the target. That was the oldest rule. Let the danger follow you, not the vulnerable. Wade chased with the desperation of a man whose power was slipping. Stop! He shouted. Stop right now! Jack didn't run straight. He angled toward open space, toward cameras, toward the places where lies had fewer places to hide. Ranger stayed near Mia and the girl, moving like a shadow that watched everything. A shape stepped from behind stacked crates. Someone waiting, trying to cut off Mia's route. Ranger's head snapped toward the threat. One clean movement. No barking. No chaos. Ranger planted himself between the person and the child, body squared, eyes locked. A silent warning that said, "Not one step closer." The figure froze. It wasn't fear of teeth. It was fear of certainty. Wade arrived behind Jack, breath ragged, fury loud. "You think you can humiliate me?" He yanked his weapon up and fired a shot into the air. The crack tore through the night.
The girl screamed and crouched, hands over her ears. Mia wrapped herself around the child, shaking but unbroken. Jack's heart stayed steady in his chest, not because he felt nothing, but because he refused to let panic drive the wheel. He turned his head slightly, checking Mia, checking the girl, checking Ranger. Then he heard a voice from the dock path, young, sharp with fear. "Dad!" A teenager ran into the light, breath clouding in the cold. 16, tall and lean, brown hair messy, hoodie half-zipped like he'd left the house too fast to think. His face held that mix of stubborn and scared that only came from a kid who'd grown up around storms and finally realized the roof might not hold. Noah Harlan. Wade's face changed. The anger cracked, and something raw showed through. Panic. "Noah, get back!" Wade started. Calvin moved first. He grabbed Noah by the shoulder and yanked him close, turning the boy slightly, positioning him between Calvin and Jack like a human door. Calvin's voice went smooth again, like oil poured over a fire. "Smart kid," Calvin murmured. "Listen to your father." Wade went white. This was the moment the world handed him the bill for everything he'd done. Jack felt the heat rise in his own blood, the instinct to end the threat quickly. But he saw Noah's eyes, wide, confused, betrayed. He saw Wade's hands tremble around the gun, not from courage, but from terror of losing the one thing he actually loved. Jack made a decision that cost him. He stepped forward, slow and open-palmed, putting himself in line with danger. He kept his voice low, steady, the way you spoke to a skittish animal or a frightened child. "Calvin," Jack said, "let him go." Calvin laughed quietly. "Or what? You'll play hero again?" Jack didn't answer with bravado. He answered with movement. A sharp shift, timed to the flicker of the streetlight and the angle of Noah's shoulder. Jack lunged, not at Calvin's face, not at Noah, but at the control point, Calvin's grip. Jack's hands locked Calvin's wrist and peeled it away in a clean, practiced motion. Calvin stumbled. Noah slipped free. Jack pulled the boy behind him, shielding him with his body, taking the risk like a debt he'd chosen to pay. Wade stared at Jack as if he didn't understand what he was seeing. The man he'd tried to crush had just saved Wade's son. For a beat, the riverfront went still, except for the fog and the girl's quiet sobs. Ranger stood near Mia and the child, steady as a lighthouse. Noah clutched Jack's coat with shaking hands, then let go, like he was ashamed to need anything. Calvin's eyes hardened. He backed away into the fog, jaw tight, retreating toward the shadows where money and secrets lived. Somewhere in the distance, a siren began to rise. Mia's phone was still in her hand, screen lit. She had made the call. Jack didn't watch Calvin run. He watched Wade instead. Because Wade was finally learning what power felt like when it turned around and looked at you. And the look on Wade's face said the lesson had only just begun. Dawn came cold and gray over Savannah, washing the riverfront in thin light.
The fog didn't vanish. It only loosened its grip, as if the city wanted to see what would happen next. Jack Mercer stood near the edge of the dock where the boards were still damp from the night. His navy winter coat hung heavy on his shoulders, the red and black plaid flannel visible at the collar. Faded jeans, brown low-cut leather boots, the same clothes he'd worn into the diner, into the warehouse, into trouble. Ranger stayed close, black and tan coat speckled with mist, ears upright and listening. The service vest read, "Service dog, do not pet," a plain truth that kept strangers from reaching for what they didn't understand. Ranger's amber-brown eyes kept flicking between Mia, the girl, and the open spaces where danger liked to hide. Mia Collins held the child's hand like she was afraid the air itself might steal her back. Under the streetlight, Mia looked younger than she had in the diner.
Fear did that. It pulled years off your face and put them back in your eyes. The girl's hoodie still swallowed her frame. Her hands trembled, not from cold alone. She stared at the river like it could answer a question she didn't know how to ask. Sirens grew louder, then slowed, then stopped. Sheriff Harold Briggs arrived with 2 cruisers behind him. He stepped out with the same tired authority as before, but his face had changed. Not softer, more awake. Like a man who'd spent years pretending a small lie was a necessary compromise, then finally saw what it had cost. Wade Harlan stood off to the side, weapon lowered now. His son Noah hovering close as if the boy didn't trust his father to stay upright on his own. Wade's pale eyes kept darting toward Jack, then away, like looking at him burned. Calvin Rourke was not there anymore. He'd vanished into fog and money and whatever exits he'd built for himself. Briggs walked toward Jack, then stopped at a respectful distance. His gaze went to the child, then to Mia, then to Ranger's steady posture.
He looked at the scene like it was a mirror he couldn't dodge.
"Ma'am,"
Briggs said to Mia, voice rougher than usual. "Are you hurt?" Mia shook her head once. Her jaw tightened. "No, but I'm done being quiet." Those words landed heavier than any siren. Briggs nodded slowly, as if accepting a sentence. "Tell me everything you know." Mia's breath caught. She glanced at the girl, then back at Briggs. "My sister went missing 2 years ago. I reported it. I followed up. Every time I pushed, someone from the department showed up at my job, smiling, checking in, like I should be grateful they remembered my name." Wade flinched like the truth had a physical edge. Briggs didn't look at Wade yet. He kept his eyes on Mia. "Did Deputy Harlan talk to you?" Mia's voice shook, but it did not break. "Not with words I could report. Just the kind that makes you feel watched.
The kind that makes your stomach hurt when you hear a car idle outside."
Jack watched Briggs closely. The sheriff's hands were still. His shoulders didn't rise with defensiveness. That mattered. A man who wanted to stay comfortable would deny. A man who wanted to change would listen. The girl finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "They told me not to trust badges." Everyone went still. Jack crouched carefully, mindful of the injured left knee, bringing his height down so he wasn't towering over her fear. Ranger sat instantly at his side, calm as stone. "You're safe right now," Jack said softly. The girl's eyes flicked to the service vest, then to Jack's face. "I heard a name," she said. "Calvin. And a place. They said it like it was normal." She swallowed. "Rourke." Briggs's face tightened. That name didn't surprise him. It angered him. And Jack saw something in the sheriff's expression that hadn't been there before. Shame, yes.
but also resolve. Briggs turned at last and looked straight at Wade. "Hand me your weapon." Wade's mouth opened, then closed. "Sheriff." "Now," Briggs said, voice quiet and final. Wade's hands shook as he obeyed. Noah stepped closer to his father, eyes wide. "Dad, what did you do?" he asked, and the question was worse than any accusation. It was betrayal wearing a child's voice. Wade stared at the ground. He looked like a man who'd built his whole life on being the one who scared others, then realized he'd become the only thing his son feared. Briggs spoke again, and this time it was not for show. "You're suspended. Badge and radio." Wade fumbled at his belt, unclipping the badge. Metal in his palm. Empty weight. He held it out like it might burn him. Briggs took it, then looked at Jack. "You have anything else?" Briggs asked. Jack didn't pull out trophies. He didn't brag about what he'd seen. He simply nodded toward Mia's phone. "She made the call. Cameras saw the movement. The rest is paperwork and backbone." Briggs's mouth tightened at that last word. He understood. Later, the riverfront filled with purposeful motion. Radios, quiet commands. A few uniforms that moved differently. Not lazy, not joking. People who acted like the night was real. Calvin Rourke was caught the way men like him always were. Not by fists, but by the moment enough people stopped cooperating with his story. Money couldn't buy silence once silence decided it was done. When the first cuffs clicked somewhere down the line, Jack didn't feel satisfaction. He felt tired. Justice didn't glow. It simply stopped the bleeding. By late morning, Mia sat with the girl in a small office at the station, still holding her hand. Mia's eyes were red, but her spine was straight. She spoke about her sister again, naming details she'd kept locked away because nobody had wanted to hear them. This time, people listened. Outside, Wade stood alone on the sidewalk, shoulders slumped, staring at his empty belt like it was the first honest thing he'd seen in years. Noah stayed a few steps away, not ready to forgive, not ready to abandon him either. Wade watched Jack approach, then swallowed hard. "You didn't have to save him," Wade said, voice low. "My son." Jack's gaze didn't soften, but it didn't harden either. "He's a kid," Jack said. "That's the point." Wade's eyes filled, fast and humiliating. "I thought quiet meant weak," he whispered. I thought fear was respect." Jack nodded once, small. "Fear is just fear." There was nothing else to say that would fix what Wade had broken. Some lessons didn't come with speeches. They came with consequences that stayed. Before dawn the next day, Jack left Savannah the way he'd arrived, without an audience. Fog still hovered over the river, thin and pale. Ranger walked beside him, steady, service vest catching the first light. Jack's left knee ached with every step, but his back stayed straight. Behind him, in the distance, the city woke up. Mia would keep the girl close. Briggs would have to live with the choices he made next. Wade would have to live with the ones he'd already made. Jack didn't carry victory with him. He carried something quieter. A child alive. A truth spoken. A line finally drawn. And in a city that had gotten used to looking away, that was more than enough. Sometimes the miracle isn't a flash of light or a loud rescue. Sometimes it is a quiet moment when fear loses its grip, when the truth finally gets spoken, and a child makes it back into the world alive. That is the kind of miracle that feels like God's hand, steady and unseen, guiding the right people to the right place at the right time. In everyday life, most of us will never face a warehouse in the fog or a badge used the wrong way. But we all face smaller tests, a moment when we can look away or stand firm, a moment when we can stay silent or say the honest thing. Faith shows up right there, in the ordinary places, in a diner, in a streetlight, in the choice to protect someone who cannot protect themselves. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment yes if you believe God still moves through quiet courage. And subscribe for more stories of justice, healing, and second chances. May God bless you and keep you safe.